All right. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 321 of the Health Detective Podcast. It is crazy how fast this is moving along. Also, if you were watching yesterday, maybe you got a chance to tune into Lucy McKellar and I's first Lunch and Learn with Lucy, or maybe you're watching or listening to this on audio and you're thinking, okay, that was a few days ago. That's fine too. We have decided, based on your engagement in the first day, we appreciated you guys being on. We said, all right, we need to test this out as a weekly thing. So for the foreseeable future, the third episode that we just added every week to the Health Detective Podcast will now be on Tuesdays, and it will be Lunch and Learns with Lucy and Ev, where we're diving deep into the nerdy topics of functional medicine, almost guiding you guys along through a lot of the things that we learn in the FDN course. So we'll still have our normal Monday and Thursday releases with stories like the one we'll talk about today or very specific topics. And then we will do the Lunch and Learns on Tuesdays. So today we have someone that is actually really cool that we got connected, because it's a little bit rarer that I find other dudes in the functional medicine space, especially FDN. Not that there's not other men, but it's probably about 15 to 20% of our graduating base, let alone someone who is an identical age to me. That is always refreshing to know that we're out there doing this stuff. Now, one thing that Jake and I do have different is he didn't necessarily have his own severe health issues, but I promise this guy's still a wealth of knowledge, and you'll see why we wanted to bring him on today. So Jake Kocherhans is the founder of Atlas Functional Wellness, which is a virtual health clinic that specializes in helping individuals suffering from chronic bloating and other gut-related issues. Jake became an FDN after desperately seeking answers when his girlfriend Callie's health took a turn for the worse. Using the principles of FDN, Jake and Callie were able to discover the root cause of her health issues, which ignited their passion for helping and serving others who were in their same shoes. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
Cool. So, as the bio already implied, my question to start the podcast off will have to change a little bit from how we start off most of them. Normally, I ask people when their health symptoms began and what they looked like. Today, I'll pose the question of what did Callie's health symptoms look like and when did they begin?
Yeah, good question. So I guess I'll start by saying, I've been in the health and fitness space for probably 8 to 10 years up until this point when, I ultimately decided to make the leap into becoming an FDN. And, for a long time worked with people, primarily weight loss, got a lot of really good results. I felt like for the most part, I knew what I was doing, right? I knew how to help somebody eat healthy and, get plenty of rest and do all the things that you would think just for somebody to have optimal health, right? So it was a couple years ago, actually, where my partner Callie and I decided that we were actually going to move out of state from Salt Lake City, Utah, down to Austin, Texas. It was the first time we'd ever moved out of state, and it was really exciting. So packed up our bags, moved down to Austin, Texas, and I guess essentially one thing to know about Callie, she's very high energy, free spirited. She's this kind of goofy, just upbeat type of person. But it was very shortly after we moved to Austin where her health really started to spiral downward, and we had no clue what was going on. So she went from somebody who really didn't have any sort of digestive issues, never really dealt with fatigue, like we went to the gym every single day, to somebody who really just had a hard time, like even getting out of bed and getting, through the day. So a lot of it started with just brain fog and fatigue, which, there's a million things that could have caused that, right? There was a lot of stress. We were moving. Who really knew what it was? But over time, that just continued to compound, right? She started getting a lot of anxiety to the point where she would have these severe panic attacks, like almost daily when it got to its worst point. She started to get all the gut related issues. So like foods that she wasn't having issues with before, she was all of a sudden getting tons of bloating, just tons of discomfort and GI issues that came along with it, which was so weird because once again, this was completely out of the blue. Prior to moving down to Texas, she had not dealt with any of this stuff. And so this was the first thing for me, somebody who had kind of been in the health space for almost a decade, feeling like I had all the answers. And I was like, look, you just got to eat healthier, or maybe get more sleep, or go sit in the sauna or whatever. Right. And, none of that typical stuff that I would recommend worked. And, that was where we started to have to look outside of myself for answers as to what was going on, right? We started going to this is the typical story, right? We'd go to the different doctors' offices, run the various standard labs, get our blood work done. As I'm sure like everything came back normal, right? Couldn't find any answers there. And it was almost kind of serendipitous where I actually got connected. And I think you've had her on the podcast, Kim Heinz. She's another FDN who I, was acquaintances with. And she was the one who really kind of put me on to what FDN is and what FDNs do and all these different things. And that was kind of the first thing that, in my mind kicked off like, hey, maybe we need to look deeper into what's going on. Like a lot of the traditional approaches, the traditional lab testing, like we're not finding answers here. And that was kind of what was the catalyst for me to actually go and get my FDN, really in search for answers to figure out what was going on with her. And fast forward up to, after we did kind of, we got certified, I was able to run the lab tests. We found out that she had mold. So we were living in mold down in the house in Austin. Because of that, she also had Candida, like very high levels of Candida that she was dealing with. That was causing a lot of the gut issues. And, since then we've been able to move out of the home, kind of put her on a protocol, and now she's back to feeling better than ever. So it's been kind of a cool journey. It's interesting how life works sometimes, but I feel like all those experiences kind of led us exactly to where, I needed to be. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one, I think she would probably agree with this. I really appreciate and respect your open-mindedness to these alternative possibilities, because I've met so many individuals who have a similar background to you where, it was very fitness oriented and there's certain things that are taught there. And not only are they taught there, but it's kind of like anything else is BS, right? Like if you don't do
right.
it this way, this is wrong. It's always calories in, calories out. There's no room for nuance whatsoever, even though many of us in the functional health space have experienced these things. So it's cool that you were not only open-minded to it, but said, hey, I'm going to go actually study this stuff to support us here. So I think that's amazing. Now, you mentioned when you moved down there, the symptoms, shortly after started.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like you guys had the education around the mold stuff and the other things at that time. So how long did it take you to correlate the move as being the actual problem, as opposed to just, oh, it's the stress of the move, as you mentioned before? Like, did you ever correlate early on before doing the lab testing side that it was the house itself that could be doing this?
No, we had no idea. And that was the hardest thing because, I think when you are in a position where you feel anxious and, sad, because a lot of this, she wasn't like depressed, but like she's just low mood, anxious, panic attacks. I think it's really easy for you to start grasping at reasons as to why this is happening, right? So I think it's she would say like, oh my gosh, it's just work is so stressful or whatever. But like we were so far off the mark in terms of thinking like, oh, this is a mold issue. And it wasn't until probably over a year since we moved down there that we kind of stumbled upon like the whole world of mold, and we're like, okay, this I think this might be a problem. And we would have instances where we would go on trips and we would leave the house and she miraculously would start
Wow.
feeling better, right? But we still like we just had no knowledge of it, so it was like not even something that came on our radar.
It's crazy because even as someone who's been in this particular space for 8+ years at this point, it still can be easy enough to write off mystery symptoms. My fiance and I moved into an apartment last year, and thank God we're out now. And I think I might have even talked to you about this on the phone, but we had mold in the apartment, and I had no idea. And it wasn't obvious at all. It was actually in the vent, so it took a long time for us to make
Mm,
that connection. Because for me, it was very subtle too. Like in the beginning, it was small stuff here and there. Then it was bad sleep issues. Then it's like I'm getting headaches all the time. What's going on there? Then it's like mood issues. There was a lot of stuff. And it got to the point where we were forced to move out because I was waking up in the middle of the night, like gasping for breath. It
Wow.
was horrifying. And it was scaring the hell out of her too, because she's sleeping while this is going on. So I kind of, just being in the space, knew it had to be something like mold at that point, but we still never found where it was until the end. And thank God for Moms on a Mission, because once my mom heard I was sick, she's like, I'm going down there, I'm tearing this crap up. So she's like in the vents, unscrewing stuff. And she was the one that actually ended up finding out, oh, no wonder he's waking up like this, because the vent, I would always sleep in the cold.
Yeah.
Maddie hates it. She thinks it's crazy, but I'm trying to get it to that 67, 68 degrees that we know is optimal. And the vent that goes into the bedroom. So I'm like closing the door, blackout curtains,
Mm.
turning the AC on all night, year round. It's blasting the mold spores into the room all night. And it was interesting to see, though, how it could affect people differently, because what you haven't mentioned so far is yourself. Did you get any symptoms while you guys were living at this house?
Yeah, that's funny. I was actually going to mention because everybody responds differently to mold, right? I think Callie's one of those ultra sensitive people where she can walk into a like a grocery store or something, and she's like, okay, I already feel the effects.
Hmm.
For myself, it was subtle, but like looking back on it, what's interesting is like during that time down in Austin, I had a few, I think probably 2 or 3 times, but I remember one distinctly where I got sick and it was like it knocked me out for an entire month, which was so bizarre because like I'm like the health guy, right? I eat healthy, I work out, I get enough sleep, I'm doing all this stuff, but I feel like more than anything, like it was just rocking my immune system to where like just a normal cold or something just put me out, and I'm just bedridden for an entire month. I also remember this is kind of funny because this is it's kind of a random symptom, but I noticed that like I had a huge issue with frequent urination to where like
Okay.
I was waking up like 3 or 4 times during the night going to the bathroom. And I know that's one of the more kind of odd symptoms of mold, but I had I even remember, and maybe this was an issue for me earlier in my life too, because I remember even having this problem a few years back, going to a urologist, getting all these tests done, doing ultrasounds and all this stuff. And they're like, nothing's wrong. And I'm like, do I pee so much? Basically, because it's not the worst symptom, but it's definitely a hindrance when you're having to go to the bathroom like every 30 minutes. And so that's something that actually cleared up as well as we kind of got on I went through a protocol. I got on binders. I did the whole thing as well. And now I feel like I kind of have a normal schedule when it comes to, going to the bathroom. So that was, yeah, not as intense, but I definitely, in hindsight, looking back, like I think it was affecting me as well.
It's I full transparency, and I'll always admit my ignorance on this show. I hope that's one of the reasons people actually like me as a host, is I'll admit that. I did not even know that was a symptom. So
Yeah.
it's not that it wasn't funny, but the reason I didn't laugh was because the second that you said that, I'm like, oh, I had that problem too. But I had so much else going on at the time that I didn't even connect it. But like, yeah, I remember being at that apartment. I'm like, am I like pre-diabetic? What the hell am I doing wrong? Because I thought
Yeah.
that's something that's correlated with that. So okay, another rabbit hole to look up after I'm done this show today. So thank you.
Yep.
Now, connecting this all to this topic of SIBO and gut health issues specifically, I'd love to bring this together because we've gotten into this story with Callie and yourself moving into this or house, it sounds like, and then having
Mhm.
this issue. But where does this come into the gut health side of things? What was going on there? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, the big issue for her was these food sensitivities that she developed pretty much out of the blue. So, I think the big thing was like anytime she was eating, high amounts of carbohydrates, because, Candida was present. And I'm not, it's like a chicken and the egg thing. Who really knows? Like maybe the mold caused the Candida. Either way, um, she found herself like anytime she ate high amounts of carbs, like experiencing these flare ups. She could no longer go out to eat, and that was a huge hindrance. Like the gut issues are a big deal. And for anybody who's dealt with anything, whether it's Candida or SIBO or parasites, like, even beyond just the physical discomfort of the bloating and the constipation or diarrhea or the acid reflux or any of those things, it's the way that it can impact your quality of life, from your confidence and your ability to go out and socialize, and even just do simple things like go out on a date on a Friday night, go to a restaurant or something. Like you always have to be like meticulously planning every moment of every day. And it was just something that I felt kind of called towards as we kind of got into the FDN space. We helped Callie out. We weren't ready to take the full plunge into the whole mold world at that point, but it was something that I did really want to help people with. It's also something that I think affects a lot of people's weight. We found a lot of people who trying to lose weight as well. And I came from that world prior. And once we fixed their gut, now it's like, wow, not only are they not getting bloated, but they're also losing weight and they're experiencing all these different benefits. So I think I kind of gravitated more towards the gut health issues. One, because it impacted Callie in such a profound way, but it was also, you know, um, yeah, something that I was really interested in learning in at the time as well.
Sure. And not to, this is a question I want to be careful with because someone asked in the comments, what protocol did you use? So let's disclaim a few things. One, this is not medical advice. Two, every protocol for every person is going to be a little bit different, especially in the world of FDN. We wouldn't necessarily recommend the same things to everyone. But if you're able to, Jake, and you want to, could we give some specifics of what you might have used at the time?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, number one, when it comes to mold, is you've got to get out of the source of exposure. I mean, that was the biggest thing. Like living in the house, we could have been doing all this stuff, nothing would have worked. And we've had clients in the exact same position who have had mold and have tried to go through everything else that I'm about to say, and it didn't work. So, if you suspect that that's a problem, and maybe you even know that you have mold, the first thing that I would recommend is maybe getting some plates for your house. Like we use a company called Immunolytics. You pay like $220. You get like 5 plates, put them in different rooms of your house, set them out for 5 days, see what grows on them. Then you send them into the lab, and then they can actually assess, is this toxic mold? Because not all mold is going to be toxic. And so they'll tell you like, if this is a problem and whether or not you need to move or remediate or kind of what the next options are. So from that point, the first thing that we did is we really tried to support her body's drainage pathways, right? Like in order for her to be able to, eliminate the mold or the candida, like we could go in and take binders and take antimicrobials, but if that stuff doesn't have anywhere to go, then like, all you're going to be doing is recirculating those and feeling terrible. So it was a lot of just making sure that we're supporting healthy bowel movements. So, constipation wasn't a big issue for her, but if that is something that somebody's dealing with, I would suggest, I mean, there's a whole number of things, right? Like making sure your body's staying hydrated, remineralizing, increasing, potassium, taking a little bit of magnesium at night, things of that nature, making sure you're going for walks and like moving your body, stimulating kind of movement through the GI tract. So that's huge. The other thing is just supporting your liver. So lots of products that you can do. And we do like Cellcore for a lot of this stuff. So, a lot of their kidney and liver support, we like their TUDCA, things of that nature. I like their binders for mold, although I will say some people, might need to start on a more gentle binder or one that's like a little less strong before they jump into that, depending on how sick you are. So we did a lot of that work. And then, once we started addressing the mold, that's where we also kind of moved into a protocol with various antifungals and antimicrobials to try to eradicate the Candida as well. So it was kind of a, get out of the source of exposure. She was already eating healthy, but like we had her go on like a lower carbohydrate diet temporarily. We're not talking like full blown keto or carnivore, but like, reducing things that are actually feeding the overgrowths in her gut. So we have that diet piece under control, eating whole natural foods, getting plenty of sleep, supporting her adrenals, all that stuff, the DRESS protocol. But then it was a combination of binders to bind and eliminate the mold, herbal antimicrobials to kill off the candida. And then, we went through a kind of like a leaky gut protocol at the end, which was like a combination of various probiotics. We use microbiome labs for that. So like their mega mucosa product, things of that nature. So
Yeah, you got all that,
I don't
guys.
know how specific you want me to get with it, but that's kind of the basis of it.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. And Wesley just asked, what was the name of the company that sent you the plates? You said Immunolytics, right?
Immunolytics. Yep.
All right. I think I know that one offhand. Immunolytics. Here you go. Wesley. All right, cool. So making sure that we get back to the main topic. I appreciate you answering the questions though.
Yeah.
So now that you guys have a business together where you're focusing on probably many things as FDNs, but definitely the gut health side of stuff. So with the people that you're attracting now as clients, like what are some of the issues or diagnoses they have specifically? Because when I think of gut issues, I'm thinking of like, okay, well, I could have pain or I could have constipation. I could have diarrhea. I could have bloating. There's a bunch of stuff. So I'm sure you get all of it, but I'm curious
Yeah.
who you're bringing in to the practice.
Yeah, so generally, we'll have people who will come in with just kind of like the classic IBS diagnosis, which, we've heard it on this podcast before, but IBS is more so a diagnosis of exclusion, right? So a lot of these people are coming with this label which says, "Hey, you have all these GI symptoms," but they've gone to the gastroenterologist and they've done all the traditional lab tests to kind of tease out anything serious. So, they'll do the colonoscopies, the endoscopies, the CT scans. They want to see if they have irritable bowel disease. They want to see if they have cancer or polyps or any of that stuff. But a lot of times those labs are going to come back as normal. And that's where people are kind of left, depending on, their gastroenterologist. Sometimes they get better recommendations. Other times it's like, hey, try to eat healthier, take a fiber supplement, and kind of send them out the door and say good luck. So a lot of times that's where people are when they first come to us, is sort of this IBS diagnosis, but I still have no idea what's going on kind of thing.
Mhm.
Right. If they're lucky, because most of the time, I mean, most people we work with, like their GIs aren't out there saying, hey, let's run a SIBO test, unless that kind of past that client was informed, or they have self-educated themselves and specifically requested that. Sometimes they'll come to us with a SIBO diagnosis. Maybe they've tried taking rifaximin, or like tried the traditional approach with antibiotics, and if they're coming to us for it just didn't work for some reason.
Mhm.
So maybe they took the antibiotics and they either didn't notice any difference, or they took it and it went away. They felt good for a few months, but it inevitably ended up coming back. So those are usually the kind of categories of people that we end up working with.
Okay, and then obviously testing's being utilized. So, what are some of the common things that are coming up more often than not on these lab tests? Like, are people surprised to find they might have freaking parasites or bacterial overgrowth? I'm curious about what comes up commonly on the labs.
Yeah, so I would say for our clients, 99% of the time, if I mean if not 100, if they're dealing with some sort of underlying chronic gut issue, or if they have a SIBO diagnosis that they haven't been able to resolve, it comes down to some sort of bacterial overgrowth, fungal overgrowth, or parasites, or possibly mold on top of that.
Mhm.
I mean, that's almost always the issue. So, SIBO is a type of bacterial overgrowth, and you have like certain pathogens as well. Like we see a lot of E. coli, you know, Shigella, things of that nature. And so that's usually what we're addressing, is some sort of overgrowth that's causing an imbalance in the bacteria of their gut, leading to inflammation, leading to damage of the gut lining. So they're getting the leaky gut. And then from that point, it's creating this cascade of issues that can stem from everything from the fatigue to the brain fog to, liver congestion and or poor detoxification. So in most cases, we're always trying to address those pathogens, as we find in most cases, like those have got to be cleared out before the person can start getting better.
Okay, and I see quite a few questions coming in. We'll get to these. I promise. I was trying to make sure we're on the main topic, but we will get to the questions. I promise. They definitely liked your mold protocol comments. We dug a rabbit
Happy
hole
to
for
talk
ourselves
about it.
here. Yeah.
Cool.
So, all right, in terms of addressing these things, then are there other, just so people understand that you don't just go and start shotgunning approaching to, or do a shotgun approach to the parasites and the bacteria and all
Yep.
this stuff. What other lifestyle things are being worked on at the same time? Because if you take a sick person and you start killing all this stuff off, for some people it can go very smoothly, and for a large percentage, they are not going to like you so much. So, what other
Yeah.
things are being done simultaneously while we're attacking this stuff?
Yeah, good question. So I mean, diet's obviously a huge piece for a lot of these individuals who are dealing with SIBO. They're going to respond very well to like a paleo slash low FODMAP kind of template. So we generally will start people out with that. We want to essentially accomplish a few things with nutrition. Number one is we want to be able to bring down inflammation in the body. We want to reduce any sort of bacterial or fungal feedings, so we're not continually feeding the overgrowth. And then we also want to help to balance their blood sugar as well. I mean, all of these things are going to be really helpful for just kind of getting their gut in an optimal state to being able to heal. So that's it with diet. We're obviously focusing on sleep. I mean, they've got to be getting enough sleep. I mean, that's huge. So just, I mean, you had mentioned making sure their room's the right temperature, going to bed on a good schedule, managing their light exposure, like the few hours before they go to bed, reducing blue light, and then also potentially just to kind of get their body in a good rhythm, exposing themselves to some sort of like natural light first thing when they wake up. So that's huge. Making sure that they're hydrating and, first thing in the morning, adding minerals to their water, like all the classic stuff, because once again, we do need to make sure that the bowels are moving before we go in and we start trying to kill off all these bad bugs, because we want to make sure that we can get that stuff out of the body as quickly as possible. So that's kind of like the initial foundation. From there, if we need to, and this is kind of dependent on the person, like we can support their adrenals with different adaptogens. Sometimes we will start off with a variety of different probiotics, which I know can be somewhat controversial when it comes to SIBO, although I think the science pretty clearly shows that, probiotics can be effective in clearing SIBO. I know not everybody's going to respond well to them, but, just based off the science, to me, what it seems like is when somebody reacts poorly, it's not that we're necessarily feeding the SIBO, but it might be more of like an antimicrobial effect to where they're actually experiencing a bit of die-off. So it's, you would want to almost approach it in the same ways you would approach an antimicrobial for one of these people, which is, hey, start low and go slow with it, right?
Yep.
And you'll find that a lot of times these people, after 3 days or so, like those symptoms start subsiding, and that can be really beneficial for helping to kind of, I guess, crowd out the bad stuff and also bring up the levels of the good bacteria in your gut. So we kind of support that over the first month. And we usually are doing a lot of this stuff, kind of the foundational stuff, while we're waiting for lab test results. Once we get the labs back, we've kind of prepped the body well. That's where we can kind of sit down based on what we find. Is it parasites? Is it, Candida? Is it, bacterial overgrowth? From there, we can kind of be a little bit more targeted with the antimicrobials to actually get rid of those things. And then afterwards, we kind of guide them through a process of reintroduction where, we're reintroducing a lot of the foods that we had previously eliminated because of the low FODMAP diet. We're starting to build back the beneficial bacteria in their gut. Sometimes we'll incorporate some, small amounts of prebiotic fibers if they can tolerate it, and we'll slowly kind of build that up. And we just want to get them to a point where their microbiome is resilient enough to where they can continue their normal life, because the goal is not to live on a low FODMAP diet for the rest of your life. I don't think anybody wants to do that. And I think that's where a lot of people find themselves, where, if we can just work on, to an extent, like strengthening that microbiome muscle, like the bacteria that's responsible for breaking down a lot of that fibrous food that causes the gas and the bloating for people who are having these issues, they'll find that, like, over time, as we kind of stair step their way through this process, they can begin tolerating a lot of these foods that they weren't able to previously.
I think that hits on the key difference between just going on YouTube University and Dr. Google to figure out this holistic stuff, which God bless anyone doing that. I get it, what that's like. I've been there. But that's the difference between just doing that and working with a well-educated practitioner. Is one, you might be able to manage symptoms at best if you even get to that point. And the other, eventually you can get your damn life back. That's kind of the whole goal here. And Jake, the people have spoken, my friend. So they're not stopping here. They got some questions for you. And I think, hey, we're here to give them what they want, right? Not to hear me talk all
Yeah.
day. So
Fire
let's go.
away.
All right. We got Caroline said, well, actually, sorry, Caroline, we'll get to you next. Anna Marie said, what probiotics would you recommend for anyone dealing with that? There are many out there. Now, you had mentioned microbiome labs. Is that something you go to a lot for the probiotics, or?
Yeah, so I love I actually love Dr. Ruscio's approach to this, where the way he kind of categorizes it is based around three primary types of probiotics.
Mhm.
So you have like the lacto bifido blends, so like your lactobacillus and bifidobacterium blends. It's where you those are typically the ones that you'll find at like various stores and whatnot. Those are kind of the most popular. Next is the spore-based probiotics. Those are the ones you're generally going to find, and I know at Microbiome Labs, and they do have a few different others, but that's kind of like what they built their brand around is the spore-based. And then the last one is, a probiotic beneficial yeast of Saccharomyces boulardii, right? And I think each one of these has been shown in studies to be beneficial for a number of these gut related issues. The question is, which one are you going to respond best to? And I do think that this is where there's a little bit of individuality. So the way that I like to approach this is usually we'll just have them implement one at a time. So just, I mean, when it comes to the lacto bifido, I don't have a specific brand for that. There's studies that show all sorts of different blends.
Mhm.
But let's say, for example, you start with like a spore based probiotic, and you're going to start with a very small amount, knowing that studies have shown like these probiotics can clear SIBO. So the way I think of that is like there's some killing happening, and whenever that's happening, there's potential die off, and that's where you're getting these adverse reactions. So starting slow, even if you have to break open half a cap in water, drink that and see how you feel, and then slowly work your way up as you can tolerate it. Some people find that they don't even actually need antimicrobials. Like sometimes that does the trick. That along with like a, proper low FODMAP diet for a period of time, like they feel 90% better just doing that. All right. They're killing it. But if you're feeling good and you can increase that amount, that's where maybe add some, you know, add in the lactobifido or add the Saccharomyces and do the exact same thing. So I think the big thing is when people are in pain and they're dealing with these issues, they want to get better as fast as possible. So they have this tendency to want to just go 0 to 100 with every single thing that they take, and they want to like double up or mega dose on the supplement. And I think that's where people run into a lot of issues. But if you can just kind of understand, why am I potentially having these reactions, and slowly work it in, and if maybe you're not reacting well to it after like a 7-day period, let's say you took it for 7 days, you feel no different, it just makes you feel awful. Well, hey, maybe put that one on the shelf for now and try another one. But I would potentially recommend trying those all three of those categories and see if you notice any improvement. With keeping in mind, the last thing I'll say is a lot of people expect like instant results with probiotics. It's not how it works. In most cases, you might start to notice benefits in like 2 to 4 weeks, but most studies show that like peak benefits are going to happen around the 2 to 3 month mark.
Mhm.
So keep that in mind. That's another thing people want to say, "Oh, I took it once and I didn't notice an immediate difference, and so I stopped taking it." But as with a lot of this stuff, when you're taking a natural approach, like it's the little things done habitually over time that ultimately lead to results. It's not going to be like a magic pill.
That's a good point. I mean, yeah, they're supplements for a reason, right? They're not medicine. Now they can be used for natural medicine. I get that we use those types of words and that type of or those types of phrases, but
Yeah.
a pill is supposed to do something very quickly, right? And potentially a pill could save your life depending on what's going on. A supplement is something that is supplemental, so it has to be
Right.
kind of added on over time. Even something like most well-studied supplement of all time so far, at least creatine, right? That's going to
Yep.
take a full month to get the full effects unless you backload it, and you can't backload a lot of these supplements, otherwise you're going to feel like crap. So yes, I like that you brought that up. That doesn't get talked about nearly enough. And admittedly, when I first started this stuff, I would try things for like a week, be like, all right, that didn't work. I'm like, dude, a week? That doesn't, this has to build up, man.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going through a phase of self titration. If you're at half a cap for a megaspore or something, you're not even able to take the full dose. Obviously, it's going to take longer, which leads us to our next question from Caroline. Could you be more specific on the binders and treatment products? Now, I think you've covered more than enough on the self treatment products. Are there any binders that you like? Because you had mentioned Cellcore, but then you also mentioned that sometimes people might need gentler ones if they're really sick.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've learned about mold is that there are binders that work better based on the specific types of mycotoxins you're trying to eliminate from the body. This is where it can be helpful to potentially run a urine mycotoxin panel if this is something that you suspect, or you can actually see very specifically, is it, ochratoxin or aflatoxin, or, any of these different types. I believe that Dr. Neil Nathan has like a whole chart. I don't have it memorized off the top of my head, but you can see things. You've got bentonite clay, activated charcoal, chlorella, Saccharomyces boulardii. Interestingly, is a known mycotoxin binder. It works quite well for like a number of different strains, and I think that could be like a good gentle place for some people to start. Cellcore's primary binders are like humic fulvic based, and I do know that those work. I think they've shown that those have worked to kind of eliminate variety of different molds from the body. So, I'm not an expert when it comes to like you need this specific binder for this specific issue,
Mhm.
but usually like bentonite clay is pretty broad spectrum. The humic fulvic seem to work really well, although those can be very powerful, with the cell core binders, I will say. But even starting with something like Saccharomyces, maybe trying activated charcoal, maybe trying bentonite clay, chlorella. Like those are kind of like the main ones that I've found success with.
Cool. Thank you. And Caroline, I did see that you have more questions. I'm going to go to Wesley next just to keep it even with people, and then we'll be right back to yours. So, Wesley had asked, with a SIBO client, would protocols differ depending on which specific strain of bacteria has the overgrowth?
Pro, Not necessarily. What I will say is that if somebody's dealing with like a fungal overgrowth, for example, or parasites, we might implement in addition to, so like we like biocidin. I mean, that works great for bacteria. I mean, it's really takes care of a lot of it. If there is something like parasites or Candida, we do like the Para X or the Candid X, like what's taught in the FDN. There's just some additional herbs that I think more specifically target fungal overgrowths or parasites. So that would be really the only difference aside from kind of everything else that we'd mentioned.
Cool. And then I don't want you don't want to put you on the spot with this one because I know that we talked off air that you don't claim to be a mold expert. It's just something that comes up in the practice. But Caroline did ask, can you speak to black mold? And I think that they had asked this when you talked about how not all mold is toxic. So we don't need to go into this as as deep as like an immunologist might or something. But just curious, do you have anything to say about black mold? Is it as prevalent as people think? Is this not always the main issue when people do have mold issues in their home? So just curious if you have any words of wisdom.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, to my knowledge, there's different types of mold that aren't necessarily black that are
Mhm.
also toxic, right? So I think it. I don't know if there's really a way to know just by like looking at it. That's why I think it's helpful to use a company like Immunolytics, because my understanding is that, hey, you have mold that grows on one of those plates, you send it in. 50% of the time, it's going to be nothing. The other 50% of the time, it's going to be toxic to some extent. And I know, Tracy had also asked, why did the mold affect Callie so badly and not me? I think a lot of this just comes down to a specific gene variant that some of us carry. So there's 25% of the population that does have a gene called the HLA-DR gene, which essentially means that your body has an inability to produce the antibodies to effectively like target and eliminate that toxic mold from the body. And so that's why you can have two people. And this is always the big issue that comes up when we're talking to couples or families who are dealing with this issue. One of them says, well, it can't be mold because I'm living in it too. Why is this person so sick and I feel fine? Well, it's because, some people just are genetically predisposed to being more susceptible to the effects of toxic mold. That doesn't mean that if you don't have the gene that you're not going to experience it. I think it's just going to be to what degree, because just like I had mentioned, I did notice my immune system was suppressed, frequent urination, probably a little bit of a brain fog. I do believe my energy has kind of picked up since, we've left the house as well. But then there's some people who will experience it and that like it really takes them down. So I don't know if that answers your question specifically, Caroline, but hopefully
Yeah,
that
that's
helps.
good. Well, and I think it's worth mentioning too. I thought it was interesting that you brought up the genetic side to this because I do think there's a variety of genes that are involved with this. That's not to say that genetics are an ultimatum in life, guys. We're not suggesting that, but it can matter for stuff like this. And if that's really You said HLA-DR, that's the gene,
Yep.
right? Okay,
Hmm.
so if that's really 25% of the population, this actually explains a lot of the stuff that I've seen, because I always thought it was interesting that it in these stories that I hear, it is actually incredibly common to see one partner get it worse than the other. So my friends Ben and Lauren, they just moved down to North Carolina last year and they left the house. Jake, I'll show you pictures after this because these people are like extremely intelligent. They're very well versed, great business people, and they know about health, but like more like fitness side, like not
Yeah.
at our level. When you see the amount of mold that grew on a painting of theirs, and then
Oh
it's like
no.
these guys are lucky they're not dead, let alone okay, as healthy as they are. So the thing is though, Lauren barely got anything, but Ben had severe allergies the entire
Yeah.
time. Same with Maddie and myself. Maddie got some headaches, but I was really getting sick. And same story with you. So I'm thinking I always thought it was because there's studies showing that we end up mating with people who are very genetically different than us. That's actually who we end up going for.
Hmm.
But I'm thinking about it, if it's a 25% rate on that gene, then really there's only a 1 in 16 chance that both partners would actually have it, just in terms of probability. So I guess
Yeah.
that's kind of rare then that both people would get affected that way. There seems to be something to that. I got to check this now because I have a genomic panel sitting around somewhere in my PDFs, and I got to see if that SNP was tested for and whether or not I have that. That'll be cool. What else we got here? Uh, okay, so also Caroline, how do you deal with high levels of Candida? Do you have a good supplement for Candida? Well, I know that you had already mentioned the Candida X, so this is something that is taught in FDN. I think this is by Biomatrix, or they go by
Yep.
BioHealth for the supplement. I always mix those up.
Hmm. I think
Biomatrix.
I think I think it's Biomatrix.
Okay,
I
okay,
think they
cool.
do that with the supplement.
Yeah, but and keep in mind, Caroline, I hope that this is clear from this conversation today. You know, these supplements can be beneficial, but there's other things that definitely need to be done. So, Jake, I'll let you speak to that. I mean, it's not just going to be a supplement protocol that truly eradicates something like an overgrowth of Candida, right? What are some of the other things that are essential for the person to be doing?
Yeah, and with Candida, diet's going to be a huge piece. I mean, that's one of the main contributing factors as to why somebody develops it. You know, eating a consistently high sugar diet over a prolonged period of time, among other kind of poor health habits over. I mean, that's usually how it develops. And so, some people say that, and I do think for some people this can work. That like you can just get rid of Candida just by improving your diet.
Mhm.
For I think some of our more difficult patients, I don't think that's the case. I do think antifungals are very helpful in kind of pushing things along, but you definitely want to address that. I think that's one of the most important pieces, and I would say just starting with, if it feels like a stretch to do something like low FODMAP or like a Candida diet, like even just starting with eating whole natural foods, right? Getting enough protein in with each meal, so you're not just eating naked carbs with each meal that are spiking your blood sugar a ton. I mean, those types of things that are keeping you satiated, preventing you from overeating, preventing you from having these cravings where you're eating junk. Like that's simple basic stuff. So eating whole natural foods, getting away from the processed stuff, in addition to, yeah, like antifungals. I mean, there's a lot of them. You've got uva ursi and caprylic acid, and can't think of a lot of others off the top of my head, but a lot of them are in the Candida X supplement. The big thing, same with the probiotics though, you really want to start low and go slow. When Callie was going through the antifungals, I mean, she had a really hard time. Like, she's one of those people who does like to go gung ho and say like, screw it, like I'm just gonna I'm just gonna mega dose, and I don't think that worked out too well for her initially, and she had to scale back. And because you can experience some adverse reactions from getting an exacerbation of your current symptoms to flu-like symptoms, fever, chills, body aches, fatigue, brain fog, so on and so forth. So you really just want to kind of take it gradually as the die-off starts to subside. Over 3 to 7 days or so, you can slowly increase till you get to the recommended amount. But yeah, it's something that you just want to take slow. It's gonna take a few months to get rid of, so you just got to stick with it.
I like that you brought up the aspect of some people say that diet alone can change it. And, that's actually probably true. But I think this is where testing is super important because it depends on why the person has this. You can get a Candida overgrowth from eating 500 grams of carbohydrates per day and binge drinking alcohol every weekend. And you might have been otherwise healthy, but you're making bad health choices. That could lead to it. But then there's people like myself that dealt with this at one point. Well, I was on 20 courses of antibiotics before the age of 18. So
Mm.
that was probably what led to my overgrowth. And here's the thing, I could self-treat that Candida all day long. That does not solve the other gut issues, though, necessarily, that are leading to an environment where Candida can be overgrown. So this is why testing is super important. You can get the entire picture of the landscape, or at least entirely as we're able to right now with our current
Yeah.
technology, and figure out a protocol that works for that person. I see a couple more questions. I'm sorry, I don't want you guys to think I'm ignoring you here, but we actually are 5 minutes away from being done the podcast. So I appreciate your engagement. You make this podcast very easy for me nowadays. All right, so Jake, one thing I want to touch on before we hop off here is I always like to ask about this stuff. You got an awesome business with Callie. You guys are really taking off. We talked on the phone, and these guys are doing some amazing stuff. So one thing I would just love to hear are like any client testimonials that, to the degree you're able to share, of course, because of privacy, just like someone that has tried everything or thinks they've tried everything before they came to you. And then you guys were finally able to be the ones that helped them using the FDN methodology and your other areas of expertise. So is there anyone like that that comes to mind when I bring that up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had a number of people who have obviously gotten great results, but I think that the ones that really stand out to me are the people who really came to us in a state of like, I feel like I have tried everything. I've exhausted different options. I've been gaslit by doctors who said it was all in my head. They tell me nothing's wrong with me. And they really feel like they're just at a point where nobody actually even believes that they're going through this, which is a really sad place to be, because like here you are desperate for help and you're dealing with all these issues and you're passing up on social outings, and people think you're just a jerk. Like, oh, they never want to hang out with me, and they're always just making up excuses and whatnot. And those people I really feel for. And so we did have a girl who came to us. She was so bad. She ended up having extremely high levels of Candida. That's ultimately what she was dealing with. But her brain fog was so severe that on my initial call with her, like, she had a hard time even formulating a sentence. I mean, I think our call was supposed to be an hour, it was like 2 hours, because she just couldn't like find the words. And then, once we went through the protocol, we actually finished up. We do these exit interviews for people who've kind of finished up the program and seen a lot of success. And we actually watched the video of like our initial call versus this one, and just like the memory recall and like her verbal fluency and like her ability to just articulate her thoughts without just sitting and staring off into the distance and forgetting what she was talking about was like night and day, completely different. So to me, that was crazy. I mean, obviously she had a lot of improvements with her GI symptoms, but just the cognitive improvements and the difference that we'd saw, she was like a completely different person. So that was one of the coolest, because it's, I think a lot of people think that they're, oh, I'm not smart, or I'm kind of, I can't think well, or whatever. But in reality, it's like, maybe it's not you. Maybe you just got something going on that you need to look into.
Sure. All right. So Caroline asked, will this be recorded? I apologize that people don't understand this, because Caroline, this comes up all the time. So if you're watching this right now and asking that question, this, where it's being streamed, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, it looks like you're on YouTube. This is automatically saved on our YouTube. So you could have paused this right now. You could rewind it right now and check out what was on before. I think people get confused because it doesn't automatically save to the videos tab. So if you go to our channel at FDN Training on YouTube, and then you go under the live tab, not the videos, but live, you'll see all the lives that we've done. So it's instantly available, and it will be there forever until YouTube kicks us off for making people healthier. So a little bit of a joke, but it's not a joke, right? So it is on there for now. And then you can always catch the audio versions of this at the Health Detective Podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts. These are usually out a week or two after the recording itself. And then finally, well, really my second to last question, because I got my signature question for you. Jake, where can people find you? There was actually someone that asked in the comments, Lynn, where can we get the information for your office, which I believe is a virtual office?
Yeah, so our website's atlasfunctionalwellness.com. We've got a Facebook group called Root Cause Solutions. If you just type that in, you should be able to find it. My Instagram is just at Jake Kocherhans. Then you can also go to at Atlas Functional Wellness on Instagram. We're there too.
Cool. All right. And Jake, our signature question on the show, my friend, and this is more general now. We've been talking about mold today, parasites, gut stuff, all that good stuff, but we could talk about anything here. If we could give you a magic wand and you could wave it and you could get every single person in this world to do one thing for their health, whether that means you force us all to start doing one thing or you force us all to stop doing one thing, what is the one thing that Jake gets us to do?
Ooh, that's a good one, man. I mean, coming from the gut health realm, I mean, with everything that I know, I just think that piece is so key and crucial. So if I were to have people do one thing, I would say, oh, just focus on eating whole natural foods. I mean, I think that's the biggest one, right? We eat so many processed inflammatory foods that just cause so much disruption to like our gut, and like we're not getting enough nutrients and minerals. Just simply eating whole natural foods, I think for most people would go further than almost anything. In addition to like obviously prioritizing sleep, but
Awesome.
that's what I would say.
Jake, thank you so much, and thanks for coming on the show. I loved this one and the different route that it took because it's really cool to hear of someone that cared so much about their partner that they said, "All right, I'm going to be part of this education process too and help you get this figured out." I think it's just an awesome testament to your guys' relationship, and it's so cool that you took the pain and then turned it into this purpose with the business at Atlas Functional Wellness. So, thank you again for coming on, and appreciate all of you guys who were engaging with us today on this early what is this, Wednesday? These are really starting to blend in here these days. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, we were crazy enough to schedule another one of these a few hours from now. So I will see you guys then for another live podcast. Jake, I hope you have a great day, my friend.
Awesome. Thanks so much.